Hey guys, welcome back to another Battlefield 6 news video. And on Friday we got this community update right here that talks about changes to land vehicles but also to the engineer class and basically how the whole combined arms combat could possibly change in Season 3. I know this is 2 days ago, but I was away over the last 2 days, and this is just, I think, too interesting and too important to not talk about it. So we still talk about it today. And first of all, they're addressing what they've learned so far through the consistent feedback of the community. And here they've seen feedback around predictability, survivability, and responsiveness in vehicle combat. And they're saying that vehicle encounters can feel difficult to read during combat with outcomes that aren't always clear in the moment. And in some situations, vehicles feel too fragile, while in others they can feel too difficult to deal with, especially when supported by engineers or coordinated repairs. And that's true, like anti-vehicle combat, or also when you are on the receiving side as a tank driver, for example, it always felt very, very inconsistent. Sometimes a vehicle took like 6 hits, and as an engineer you didn't know why suddenly you needed 6 hits, and then on other times you only needed 2. And as a vehicle driver, sometimes you felt like you died in an instant, or your vehicle was destroyed in an instant, and you couldn't really read what was going on or why it was happening. So these changes are definitely necessary. So what they're going to change is, first of all, they will focus on more predictable vehicle combat. And this means that previously a lot of anti-tank tools were capable of eliminating tanks in only 2 hits. So for example, if you used an RPG, then you could really destroy a tank with 2 hits to the back of that tank, because this is the weak side of it. But this will not be possible anymore, because what they're doing is that, with the exception of some specialized tools, this will be increased to 3 hits, at least 3 hits across the board. Alongside of this, they're also simplifying some elements of the damage calculation system, because right now it can be pretty complicated, because there is a wide range of possible values that you can get depending on which spot of the vehicle you hit and at which angle you hit that spot or the vehicle, which of course makes it really difficult to judge how many hits that vehicle can still take. So it's hard to judge for both an engineer but also for the vehicle driver. And what they do here is that they reduce this amount of possible values so that similar shots will result in a small number of predictable damage values depending on the quality of the hit. So it will still reward positioning and lining up strong angles, and it will still depend on which spot or which side you hit of that vehicle. But when you hit it at a certain angle from the side and then you hit it at a slightly different angle from the same side, these numbers will not be as far away from each other that they were before. They're also reducing the number of vehicle specific damage modifiers, and they will entirely rebalance vehicle health pools. So depending on the vehicle class, it will be easier to understand how many hits a vehicle can take. And they're also making changes to guided weapons so that their damage is no longer affected by impact angles or hit location. So these are basically the same changes that they did after a while in Battlefield 2042 back then. So after this change, the guided weapons will deal a consistent amount of damage. And additionally, they're also making improvements to how anti-air missiles interact with countermeasures such as flares to improve the reliability of those tools. Then the next improvement that they're making is for the survivability of ground vehicles. And here they're specifically addressing the cases where several engineers are repairing the same vehicle at the same time. And in these cases, it's really, really hard to tell when you can actually down a vehicle, how many hits it can still take. And it can be very frustrating as well for the engineer or for another vehicle when you take a shot and you hit that vehicle, and then before you can actually take the next shot, that vehicle has more health than it had before. So what they're doing is that, first of all, there will be changes made to the automatic healing of vehicles, which means that instead of repairing at a constant rate, the automatic healing will begin strong but will weaken over time while a vehicle remains in combat. And they're also introducing diminishing returns when multiple engineers are repairing the same vehicle at the same time, so that repairs don't scale in a way that becomes overly difficult to counter. They're also removing the health brackets that the vehicles have right now, where you usually have these 3 health segments, and when you get below one of the health segments with your vehicle's health, then with the automatic healing you cannot get up to full health anymore unless you get repaired by an engineer or you go to a repair station. So they entirely remove these health brackets, and then vehicles will take longer to begin regenerating health, and this time is increased from roughly 6 seconds to 12 seconds. But once the regeneration begins, it will be significantly faster, which was increased from around 5% of health per second to 10% per second. And this will continue all the way to full health instead of stopping at the end of the bracket. Plus, even when they are critically damaged, vehicles will no longer be prevented from regenerating health entirely, and instead regeneration will continue at a heavily reduced rate, which is roughly 80% slower than normal. So overall, this means that vehicles take longer to safely recover during combat, but are more self-sufficient once they successfully disengage. Now, moving on, they're also addressing the control and responsiveness of vehicles, which was definitely necessary. So what they're doing is that they're increasing the turret rotation speeds and improving how aiming behaves, especially in first-person view. And they're also reducing how often armored vehicles lose mobility as a result of taking damage, which means that you will only use your mobility from anti-tank mines, at least that's what they're saying right here, rather than this effect being triggered by general incoming damage. For air vehicles, they're also making improvements to threat awareness, which means that there will be a new UI indicator that helps pilots to better identify incoming missiles and nearby threats, which gives them a bit more time to react and make decisions while in combat. And lastly, they're also making changes to loadouts of vehicles, but also of the engineer class. And here they're not naming every change they're making, but they have some examples. So for example, they are removing the reinforced plating upgrade that you can do on the tank, for example, as it made it harder to judge incoming damage and overshadowed other choices. They're also adjusting baseline vehicle durability and replace it with a new passive that speeds up recharge rate of countermeasures such as projectile intercept systems or the thermal blocking smoke, but only while you are at low HP. And they're also making targeted improvements to vehicle equipment. For example, thermal smoke will deal damage to enemy soldiers within its radius, which increases the defensive value of this upgrade, or counterfire radar will include a passive component to improve its uptime and overall utility. In addition to this, they're also expanding the equipment options for vehicles like the IFV, so that those can use the mine countermeasures, for example, or the mobile command center. And then, like I said before, they're also making changes to the engineer loadout, and as part of this, they're completing a full balance pass on launchers, including improvements to some underused options like the EGLA or the MBT law. And they're also applying the same approach to anti-vehicle mines because they want to give each option a clearer purpose within the game so that choosing between them becomes a more deliberate decision. And then at the end, they're just writing that there are more changes planned and more improvements, especially when it comes to survivability, handling, and UI, but they will share more about this in the patch notes that we can expect closer to the release of Season 3. So I'm guessing on Friday as usual. And yeah, that was it for today. I could imagine that this actually changes how Combined Arms combat feels quite a bit, especially on the bigger maps. And maybe it does make this whole interaction or also anti-vehicle combat a little bit more healthy. I think there are quite a lot of good points in here, and they're addressing a lot of points that were actually frustrating in the past, or they're still right now. But as always, tell me what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video and you want to stay tuned for more videos like this, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. And I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'm Catwoman and you are awesome.